My name is Samantha Fogg. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the co-president of Seattle Council PTSA. As council, we represent all of the PTAs and PTSAs over 80 in Seattle Public Schools. To some people, I appear to be white. To others, I do not. I am, in fact, both Chinese and white. I am also disabled. I'm wearing a headset. I have dark hair with gray, and my background is the Seattle Council PTSA logo. What I just did was a visual description, and we do this so that people, whether or not they can see a screen, have similar amounts of information. We have interpreters joining us tonight, as well as live transcription closed captions. And we ask that all speakers slow down and take pauses to support our interpreters. You can choose your language: Spanish, Somali, Amharic, Vietnamese, Cantonese, English. And again, we thank everyone for their patience as we worked to get interpretation set up. If you need an accommodation that is not currently being met, you can use the chat to contact our hosts. I want to thank the Seattle Education Association, the NAACP, Special Education PTSA, Seattle Council PTSA, for co-hosting tonight's event. I want to thank our legislators who are joining us tonight. We have a very full room tonight, 106 people, so I apologize if I miss naming some of you, but I saw Senator Peterson, Representative Chop, Senator Valdez, Representative Farivar, Representative Fitzgibbon. If I missed you, please send a message to our hosts and I will acknowledge you, legislators. We so appreciate you joining us tonight. I also want to mention a special thank you to Representative Paulette, who is also here, who will be speaking later tonight. I want to say thank you to Seattle Public Schools, who cannot advocate in this space, but who can inform and share information. And from Seattle Public Schools, we are joined by Seattle Public Schools Board Vice President and Legislative Liaison, Liza Rankin, and Devin Gurley, the Executive Director of Special Education and Inclusion. Thank you to all of the organizations and speakers and all of you in the audience who are joining us. Our format tonight will start with community speakers, then our legislators, and finally questions. We ask that all of our speakers tonight keep their remarks short, as we have so many people and organizations who are passionate about this topic joining us tonight. If you run too long, in the interest of being able to hear from everyone, I will have to cut you off. Apologies in advance. Now, I would like to introduce the past president of Seattle Council PTSA, Sabrina Burr, to ground us in why we're here, the importance of K-12 education, and why we're asking you to fund our future. Oh, and I wanted to mention that we also have Representative Reed. Thank you, Representative Reed, and Representative Emily Alvarado. And I did mention Representative Chop, but I want to make sure that everybody heard. So thank you again. And I apologize. It's hard to scan through all 109 people, but thank you. Now, Sabrina, I'm going to hand off to you.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Like Samantha said, my name is Sabrina Burr. I am a past president of Seattle Council PTSA. But my most important role is that of mother. I am a mother of a Seattle Public Schools 2022 graduate of Cleveland High School. And she is one of the reasons why I'm here. And I will have to tell you, I'm gonna try to slow down. I am a parent who went back to school with my child. My daughter is my miracle baby, my 7th pregnancy, my only live birth, and I had her at 42 years old. I needed to make sure that my daughter's love for learning, sense of self, and her spirit was not crushed in our K-12 education system, as I watched that happen to my brother. In the years that I was fortunate to be partner with Seattle Public Schools, and more importantly, thousands of parents throughout Seattle Public Schools, I see the gap. I do want to say a few things. I know in the core of who I am, there is nothing more important than our children, other than Mother Earth, because without the earth, our children could not live. There is no profession more important than that of our teachers. Our teachers shape our future, but we don't give them the respect, the pay, or honor their intelligence when making decisions about what's best for educating our future. The reason why I say the soul of America is birthed in our K-12 education is because mostly everyone, I don't care what your background is, has some kind of educational scar. And I know we're short on time, but I want us to pause. I want you to center. I want you to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And I want you to think about your education, elementary school, walking in. And what if, when you walked in the door of our education system, you had an individual education plan that was tailored just for you, for how you learned, for what your interests were, those tools, that education that would prepare you for not who you had to be to survive, but who in the core of you know what you were created to this earth to do and be. In healing circles, I ask this question. And I ask this question of our youth. And some of the youth and some of the children that are most affected are those with individual education plans. My daughter was an architect of hers starting in 4th grade. But so often, our schools and our districts cannot fulfill the needs that federal recognized legal document, what my daughter was told when she finished her first IEP. We don't fund it. In my community, and I didn't give my description and I should have, I'm African American. I have naturally curly hair. I have black glasses. I have on a red blouse. And I have plants and pictures in my background. The soul of America is birthed in K-12. In 2012, I did Governor Gregoire's education press conference. And we talked about a street not far from my house, Rainier and Henderson, where far too many lives, far too many little boys that I pushed on the swing were killed due to gun violence. Right now, today in Seattle, that neighborhood is the most impacted. In our state, and even in our country, it is one of the most diverse zip codes. It is one of the most areas, students of color, most likely, like my daughter, dyslexia, executive function. 11th grade, we found out she had dyscalculia. Us not funding special education in high school means many students who need math support are put in a resource area where they're given support to get their homework done, but they never are learned to master how they learned. We don't honor learning styles. We don't honor the gifts that our children have. I had the fortune to be in a pre-K-8, and I see kids with IEPs who maybe have behavioral problems early on. And because their IEPs were met, because they had trusted adults, some of those very students I watched walk across the stage. I saw their accomplishments in high school. And I even wonder what would have happened if we would have funded them better, if we would have given our general education teachers partnerships with our special education teachers. Please know what goes on in society, mental health, gun violence, our health is all affected by what goes on in our K-12. And who we impact most is what I've seen on budgets far too often on building leadership teams at the building level and the district level. Shortfalls to our most critical students that end up becoming the young people like the ones that I see now today that we graduated in 21 and 22. Unhoused, food insecurity. And I'm going to end with this. Dr. Dwayne Chappelle, who was a Rainier Beach High School principal, is now over the city of Seattle, early learning and education. And in some work for Seattle Public Schools during our student outcomes focused governance, we asked a question. What is something that you were very, very proud of, but later on looking back, it wasn't something that you should have been so proud of? And Dwayne was very honest. And he said, I used to be very, very proud of my graduation rates. He said, but then I start to think, everybody had a diploma, but did everybody who graduate have a place to go, have a place to be? Most of the children that I see are the ones who had IEPs that we are failing now that impact every part of our budget. When I was in the school, both as staff and parent, the children who had emotional problems are the ones whose IEPs were not followed. There's nothing more important than our children. And if we believe that, and if we want to change what goes on in our schools, what goes on in our homes, and what goes on in our neighborhoods, we will look at every child as valuable and not just be satisfied with giving them a pass and a diploma, but prepare them for our future. for their future so that they can be strong, contributing members of society, no matter how they are gifted to this world. And I'm going to hand it back over to Samantha. Thank you.
Thank you for that, grounding us in why we're here and what we need to do, Sabrina. The words, "the soul of our nation is birthed in K-12 education," are always worth repeating, and I'd love for us to keep that in our hearts as we listen tonight. As we look at who we want to become, the Washington we want to be, we know that we need the expertise of all Washingtonians. All of us who move through the world in all different ways, communicate in different ways, understand in different ways. We value every Washingtonian, but right now, Washington is not fully funding basic education for one category of students, based solely on disability. We can make a choice to change this. Special education is the name we give for basic education for students who qualify for IEP. When we're talking about special education, we're talking about basic education. To help us understand some of the terms, I would like to bring in an expert. Devin Gurley is the Executive Director of Special Education and Inclusion at Seattle Public Schools. She has spent 22 years in special education, including 16 years as a special education teacher. And I want to say welcome, Devin. And my first, I want to give you an opportunity to do your visual description, and then we'll go into questions.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm really happy to be with you all. My name is Devin Gurley. I use she, her pronouns. I have white skin with brown freckles, long brown hair, and I'm wearing brown glasses, a light brown sweater, and I have a blue background.
And we're going to keep our questions and answers fairly short because we are short on time, but I wanted to ask you briefly, how does school funding in Washington work?
Sure. Happy to answer that question. So funding for education, including special education services, comes from a combination of federal, state, and local revenues. Federal law requires that students with disabilities be provided their required services regardless of funding from federal or state sources. State law provides that special education services are part of the program of basic education, as you mentioned earlier, to be fully funded by the state. The state uses a formula for calculating basic education funding and additional special education funding for each school district. Additionally, and finally, local funds are used by districts to fill in the often substantial gap between the actual cost of serving students and what the state and federal funds cover.
So tonight, one of the words that we're going to hear is, or one of the phrases we'll hear is the cap, or as many refer to it, the arbitrary cap. What is the cap?
Sure. So the cap is the limit on a percentage of a district's enrollment that the state will provide additional special education funding for. The current cap in Washington state is 13.5%. So if more than 13.5% of the district students require special education services, the state does not fund those additional percentage.
And what is the multiplier?
So the multiplier is the way that our state calculates how much additional funding a district receives for each student requiring special ed services up to that 13.5% cap. And the multiplier is a percentage of the district's basic education allocation. Sometimes you will hear it referred to as BEA. The current multiplier is a two-tiered system based on the amount of time a student spends in the general education classroom. Students who spend 80% or more of their day in the general education classroom are in that first tier. And the second tier is any student who spends less than 80% of their school day in the general education setting. The multiplier does not take into consideration the cost or type of students services that students receive.
How does language access intersect with special education? Briefly.
This is really critical. So language access intersects with special education in a number of ways. It's one of the pillars of a student's free and appropriate public education, or FAPE, under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, often referred to as IDEA. Language access is essential in multiple parts of a student's education. It's critical for communication with parents, for parents' engagement in the IEP process, for identification of special education service needs of multilingual learners, as well as providing supports to students and services to students with disabilities who are also multilingual learners.
And finally, and again briefly, what is inclusion?
Sure. So inclusion, and this is an OSPI definition as well, so you can see it on their website, is when all students can meaningfully participate in the general ed setting, both academically and socially, so that every student is fully included member of their community, which means that all students, regardless of their designation to receive special ed services, are provided with targeted services, supports, and accommodations, allowing them to learn in the general education classroom, interact with peers, and engage in the core curriculum.
Thank you so much, Executive Director Gurley. We are now going to turn to the first of our pre-recorded student videos. And so we'll hear from an 8th grader.
My name is Emma Fogg. I use she, her pronouns. I have long brownish pinkish hair and I'm wearing a blue shirt and a denim coat. My eyes are brown, I look white, I'm white and Chinese, and I have a purple cord around my neck with a key on it. Screens give me really bad migraines. I'm not asking you to fix the whole world. I'm asking you to fix the amount of funding so that people can get what they need and so that I don't have to worry about if I'm going to get the education I want. Because it's really hard to learn when you're worried about if you get to learn. I hope that you'll give the schools more funding to be able to get the kids that need special education. Thank you.
And now I would like to introduce Seattle Education Association President Jennifer Motter and Vice President Mish Vecchio. Jennifer and Mish.
Hi, everybody. Hi, I'm Jennifer Motter, she, her pronouns. My hair is brown, shoulder length, and I am white. I have freckles and wearing a red long sleeve shirt. I'll turn over to you for a description. I'm sitting next to Mish Vecchio.
My name is Mish Vecchio. My pronouns are they, them. I'm white with short dark hair and eyeglasses. I'm wearing a black shirt and a beige cardigan.
And we're here, we're so honored to be here in this room with our community partners and with everyone, educators, parents, students, and legislators, because one thing that we can all agree on is that all students deserve and need a high quality education. And that's why we're all here tonight. For too long, our state has not been fully funding special education, has been relying on districts to fill that gap with levies, and that's inequitable. That's why we're here advocating to make changes to that. We recognize that, so thank you legislators for being in the room, listening to these stories, because it's really important that we fully fund the resources and services that our students and families need, students with disabilities need, including language access, which we want to emphasize.
We ask that as you listen to these stories, you make the connection between these experiences and our decades of inadequate state funding have resulted in inequitable access to basic education for students with disabilities. Our ask of you tonight is that while you listen, you envision how we could be improving inclusionary practices, not just in Seattle Public Schools, but across Washington State, if we were to fully fund special education. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I really wanted to thank President Motter and Vice President Vecchio for talking about what we are here for tonight. And we really are asking legislators to fund our future. And now I am truly honored to introduce three incredible people, though one of these incredible people may have dropped off the call. So the first one is Elsa Hunessen, author of Washington State Book Award winner for her book, Being Seen, who was recently chosen as one of Seattle's most influential people by Seattle Magazine, and Laura Kramer. So I'm going to start with Elsa, if you would like to do your description and go ahead.
Hi, my name is Elsa Huneson. I am a deaf-blind woman. I'm wearing a gray sweatshirt with black lettering on it, wearing glasses that are blue and gold, and there's a little bit of glare on them from my screen. I have on hearing aids that are pink and gray with teal and gold sparkly molds in my ears. I'm a white woman, and I have one cataract that is teal and the other eye is a blue-gray. I am a graduate of Seattle Public Schools. I am a parent of a student in Seattle Public Schools. I'm also a volunteer in Seattle Public Schools, and I'm here to talk to you about the importance of special education from all three of those perspectives. As a graduate, I feel that I was given incredible support, not because of funding, but in spite of it. I went to the NOVA project, where the teachers were there 100% of the time for students who came across the district, frankly, as the island of misfit toys, we like to call it. And so there were a lot of disabled kids there. There were a lot of non-disabled kids who had been bullied. There were non-disabled kids who also had other difficulties in school. And not only did we help each other, but the staff was there and knew that they could work together to support us. That's an unusual experience. For most disabled students in Seattle Public Schools, I've heard from them, not just heard, that they do not feel like they're included in the same ways, that their learning needs are not being met. And I witnessed that because as a volunteer, I see disabled students who are being let down, not by their teachers, but by the support their teachers. Teachers need to be able to support disabled students at the same and equal support rate as non-disabled students. Otherwise, they don't get the same equal education as their peers. And that education is our civil right. It's something that is meant to be granted to us. Disabled students are your future. For so many people, they look at a disabled person and say, well, what are they going to do when they grow up? And I can tell you what I've done as a grown-up. I've written books that have changed the way that public policymakers and media makers look at the world. I've spoken with Congress people and changed the way that they do business when it comes to supporting disabled constituents. I have worked across this country to educate people on ableism and the experiences of disabled people everywhere. That is because I'm a Seattle Public Schools graduate. If I had not gone to Seattle Public Schools, I would have out of high school because I failed geometry 3 times in private school with no accommodations and no support. My Seattle Public Schools teachers said, you can do math a different way because they were a project-based learning program. They hadn't been able to have that flexibility to do it. I wouldn't have graduated from Seattle Public Schools either. Seeing disabled students for who they are, the learning needs that they need, and the brilliance that they can accomplish when they're supported is why we need to fund fully the experiences of disabled students in Seattle Public Schools. We can't do this without the financial support for our teachers and for their parents and for the students who will grow up to be incredible grown-ups, because disabled kids can achieve the same level as their non-disabled peers. Thank you very much.
And Laura, I'm going to hand to you next.
Yes, hi everyone. Good evening. Thank you for being here. My name is Laura Grammer. My pronouns are she and her. I am a white woman with purple glasses, brown shoulder length hair, wearing a blue shirt. This evening, I decided to sign instead of using my voice. I am here as a deaf parent, and I am very involved in the deaf and hard of hearing community, as well as I am a deaf adult, a deaf parent. My 2 boys are also deaf, and my husband is as well. We grew up with an IEP, and we did not get the support of that IEP to help us get through school. My husband had a very different experience, but that's his story, he can tell. My 2 boys are deaf as well. They're both very different individuals. They both are deaf, and they both have their different disability degree. They have had hearing tests done. I know the school has the IEP, and they've decided to determine what services are going to be provided. And one thing that has really bothered me is that they had decided how a disabled deaf person will be. And they don't have the lived experience as a person who is deaf or has a hearing loss. Experience is not the same for every person. As a parent, I need to have that support for them. Same thing, it's for adults or for kids. It's being nervous, especially when it comes to communication access, and that is just taken away. I know that experience. It has happened to many. It depends on the day and what's happening and what communication is happening, but it's being taken away. So communication is a right. Also, I advocate for programs to have accessibility for my boys. And what does that really mean? For example, the school curriculum. Maybe it's not a good fit for some students. For example, my younger kids, they are not hearing learners. But the school teachers are thinking that everyone learns through their ears, and they're really pushing for that. And I know that within the budget of the school, there's a barrier with getting the correct curriculum to fit their needs for my child. So I'm happy you're all here tonight to really hear us. And I'm happy that the legislators will hear about us that are experiencing what we are with disabled. And really pushing for this special education and really removing this cap. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Elsa. I think Christiana is not in the room. So as I mentioned earlier, I am disabled. My child is also disabled. In order for me to attend this meeting, it needed to be on Zoom. Thanks to all of the things we've learned these last few years, a lot of people have learned that attending meetings on Zoom is convenient, accessible, easy. My child, on the other hand, discovered during the pandemic that her neurologic system can't handle screens. And so she and I very rarely appear in the same place, because you will see me online, but she is in person. We move through the world in different ways. We bring different expertise and experience. In our disability communities, we find knowledge and abilities to navigate creative solutions and ways of handling things that maybe non-disabled people haven't had the opportunity to try or become fluent with. For me, when the world came remote, it was like everybody showed up to the party I was already at. And I want to say welcome. And I want to say, if we can make K-12 inclusive and fund our future, we'll have more options and solutions for the problems we'll be seeing in the future. Now we're going to take a moment and we're going to shift gears. We are going to go to Seattle Public Schools Director and Vice President Rankin. Board Vice President Rankin, welcome. I'll let you do a visual description.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Liza Rankin. I am the, as Sam said, Board Vice President and also the Legislative Liaison for the school board. I am a middle-aged to upper middle-aged white woman. I have dark brown hair and dark eyes. I'm wearing a blue sweatshirt that happens to have cherries and bunnies on it, drawn by Dick Bruna, if you know that illustrator. And I am just absolutely grateful to Sam, to Seattle Council PTSA, to all the other co-hosts of this event tonight. And a huge thank you to our Seattle legislators. This issue is so important to so many of us. And I want to provide just some informational background on the scope of the issue at hand. Special education is not just a special education issue. It impacts all of our schools, all of our communities, all of our classrooms. I know from the values of the community in Seattle Public Schools, how important it is to have safe and welcoming environments, places where students can come as their whole selves and be welcomed and accepted. And then, of course, it's also federally mandated that all students have access to a free and appropriate education. And that's where the special education funding comes in. Speaking with school board directors from across the state, with friends, family members, this is the kind of most aligned of our broader public schools community in Washington state I have seen around the need to focus on improving funding and supports for special education services. So it's exciting. the numbers for Seattle Public Schools can seem really scary and big, and we are the largest district in the state, so those numbers should be the biggest. But I'm going to share some percentages. Typically in Seattle, state funding covers about 45% of what we spend in SPS on special education services. And the federal funding covers about 7%. So that means that local levy dollars, which the state refers to as enrichment dollars, are paying for about 44% of our costs to provide special education services, which is a lot for a critical component of basic education. We are budgeted, SPS is budgeted to spend about $90 million from local levy funding to cover the costs the 2022-23 school year for serving meeting the needs of students with IEPs. The cap is something that's quite interesting. The 13.5% is that, as Sam noted earlier, arbitrary level above which the state provides no additional funding for students with IEPs. Across the state, 15% of our students attending public schools have an IEP. And so that varies by district, but across the state, it's 15%. Some districts are over, some are under that cap. But even for those who who have students with IEPs under 13.5%, the multiplier is a factor that doesn't fully account for the cost of providing the services to the students. So even under 13.5%, districts are still not fully funded for the services that they want to provide, and are legally bound to provide. What I would like to summarize with is to say that what I do know from my role in Seattle Public School Board and working with those in and outside of our district is how much our districts, our schools, our educators want to equitably meet the needs of all of our students. And so I'm just really heartened and grateful for everyone sharing their stories tonight, to our legislators who are here because this is an important issue and they know that it's an important issue. This is truly funding the success of our students with disabilities today is funding the success of all of our students and is funding the success of the future of our state. And that includes, shifting to what we are also eager to see, experience, and provide as parents, students, educators, which is meeting the needs of these students in more inclusive settings as well. So thank you again so much for being here. And I look forward to hearing from the next speakers.
Sorry about that. I am now unmuted. Thank you, Vice President Rankin. Even though this is a Seattle-focused forum, this is a statewide problem. And our next speaker will be able to speak more broadly from a statewide perspective. Diana Marker is executive member of our statewide Special Education Advisory Council, or SEAC. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Diana Marker. My pronouns are she, her. I have shoulder length brownish gray hair. And my background is blurred. I'm wearing a gray sweater. I'm pleased to be joining you tonight As Sam mentioned, I am a member of this Washington State Special Education Advisory Council. And we are a statewide council that is tasked with providing recommendations to the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, as well as the legislature on matters related to students receiving special education services. We as a body are in support of the removal of the 13.5% cap. And I should say too that we are not an advocacy organization. We make recommendations, and this recommendation is based on the evidence that there is disparity and inequity in special education funding. We also are in support of inclusive practices and recognize that family and community engagement and language access are critical components to inclusive practices. So we advocate for increased access to those as well. And I should say, we don't advocate, we recommend increased access to those as well. Our body meets quarterly. Our next meeting will take place in February, and we do plan to make recommendations to the legislature based on any bill that is related to students receiving special education and inclusive practices. So thank you for convening tonight, and I'm enjoying listening to all of you speak.
Thank you so much. Now I would like to introduce Rita Green, NAACP's Alaska, Oregon, and Washington Education Chair.
Hi, everyone. I am off camera due to connection issues, but I will describe myself. I do have a picture up, and I have on a black jacket, a silver scarf, and shoulder length hair, and I am a Black woman. My hair is dark brown, and then the background is white. And my pronoun is just me. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to read everything that has been written, but I do just want to talk about the key points for special education. And I know as a legislature, your job is definitely hard, as well as, being in the district, because everyone is coming at you for funding. And my personal belief is that our total education needs to be fully funded 100%, not SPED asking for money, this group asking for money. Our total education needs to be fully funded. And I think that we do a poor job in Washington State for as wealthy as we are. So that is something that I would like for you guys to really think about. But in terms of special education, the disabilities of Indigenous Black students are often unidentified by school districts due to racism and bias. These students are often labeled as having behavioral issues, which result in them being disciplined and suspended at a much higher rate than their white peers. The students are identified often and denied services because teachers and administrators have discretion to utilize funding for their students that they favor. And so this is a problem, and I do not believe that the school districts should be the sole authority to decide if a child should receive special education services. If a medical or mental health profession professional determines a child needs an IEP or a 504, the school district should be required to honor that recommendation. The WAC gives school districts discretion in regards to information they receive from medical and mental health providers. However, school districts shouldn't have the moral authority, more authority than the experts. Parents find themselves in an uphill battle with school districts, pleading for services their children need and deserve. School districts use the budget as a defense for their discriminatory actions without providing tangible evidence. School districts should be held accountable for their actions. They should be required to keep a detailed budget of how much money they have for special education and how it's dispersed. This should include a detailed report of the cost of services spent on each student. Of course, the information should be collected within the compliance of HIPAA. There should also be a committee formed to create a WAC that determines how special education funds will be spent and tracked. The committee should include parents and community organizations such as the NAACP to guarantee the WAC is equitable. These records should be available through a public records request. When students are denied services and their disabilities are not identified, they are denied the opportunity to reach their full potential and to become productive adults. It puts them on a path to irreparable harm, and such systemic racism reverses the work of our ancestors. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are now going to turn to the second of our pre-recorded student videos. Before we start, I'm going to mention that that the student will be mentioning a slur in this video that was used by someone else. And if that may be triggering for you,
my name is Ren Lane. I use they, she pronouns. I am wearing sunglasses. I am white. My hair is very short and dark. I am a senior in high school. I have various major chronic health conditions which create a need for vast accommodation. I'd first like to acknowledge and thank the wonderful, supportive educational staff I have encountered. But more often than not, I have to constantly remind educators of my needs and plead admin to update my accommodations, which rarely happens. We have a system where access to support falls on disabled and marginalized children. This isn't right, and a flaw which can only be addressed by increasing support through funding. Disabled people are the strongest, smartest people I know, and so often treated as unintelligent burdens. It is no different at school, where I've even had admin use the word cripple. We deserve the funding to create a system which reflects disability diversity. We come from all walks of life. Right now, as a disabled queer person, I never see myself represented in educational spaces. I don't want an apology for this. I want action. I want to have graduated last year with my peers, not to have had to take a year off because I couldn't fight the battle of being disabled at school and a failing body at once. When educators signed up to work with children, that includes disabled children, we are members of this community with beautiful things to contribute. Actions speak louder than words. I ask for your support, not just in your words, but in your actions, in improved special education training and budget. With accommodations, I will likely be graduating with honors, and without, I would not be graduating at all. Thank you.
asking for action, and we're all asking for that too. We're asking for action, for funding, for professional development, and professional development requires funding. So thank you to Ren. Our next speakers are from Seattle Special Education PTSA. We have President Sherilyn Crowther and Seattle Special Education PTSA Vice President Yana Parker. I'm going to hand to Sherilyn. Thank you, Sherilyn.
Hi, I'm Sherilyn Crowther, she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman, middle-aged, which is a broad range, short brown hair. I am wearing a blue turtleneck. golden brown glasses, and I have a plain background. I'm here tonight with multiple roles: Seattle Special Education PTSA president, an active voter, and Max's mom. When Max was 10 days old, we got a rare diagnosis. I had no idea what to expect. What was school going to be like for him? Would it be like mine, where kids with disabilities were barely seen, if at all? I can thank Washington state lawmakers for the fact that he was even able to attend school. Because in 1971, Washington state lawmakers passed the Education for All Act, a first of its kind law guaranteeing a right to public education for all students. That law led to a national Education for All law by 1975, and subsequent laws have improved the lives for students with disabilities. In the decades since, the research on special education services show they result in better outcomes for children with disabilities. In the last 2 years, the research looking at education through the COVID closures shows what happens when education supports for any student are reduced or not available. Education suffers. Max is now 18. His birthday was earlier this week. And I'm certain that this week, a new family is starting, that a couple is holding their new baby, a baby that might have a diagnosis of a disability, or the diagnosis for their child is going to be coming a little later, a diagnosis of autism or ADHD or dyslexia or another learning disorder that is still a few years away. Whatever the diagnosis, that child will thrive if special education services are provided in full. 2023 can be like 1971, where Washington lawmakers led the way. Take action to improve education for all students by fully funding basic education. On behalf of the parents and the teachers and students that I represent, we will support you. Yana?
Hi, my name is Yana Parker, and I use she, her pronouns. I am a white woman with mid-length curly red-brown hair, gray and black color block shirt, and large wooden earrings. My background is a solid light color right now, but I may turn off my camera as I speak tonight. I have multiple identities and roles in my community and my home. And I have been volunteering on the board of the Seattle Special Education PTSA for the last few years because of my experience as a person with medical background and with disability, an immigrant, and my English as a second language. Most importantly, what brought me through education advocacy work and supporting other families is my lived experience as a parent of 2 children with disabilities. Some of them are invisible disabilities, and who are attending public school currently and are currently receiving special education services. Being a parent is rewarding, but also hard. It is harder if your children have additional needs, such as those related to disabilities, or their development is influenced by intersections of other identities like language and even high cognitive abilities, which are just a potential if their needs are not identified timely and accurately met. And that happened to both of my kids, and all I could do is keep asking for them, for the schools to support them. Figuring out what our children require to thrive is a tremendously complex, long, and often lonely journey for a parent. First, we trust that the school will be there for us to help us navigate. This has not been my family experience, and not because people didn't try.
I would like to give a little bit of specific background to offer perspective on how crucial education funding is. Not just because appropriate education of disabled children is their civil right protected by law. In 2008, about 4 years after I came to the US, is when my eldest son, now 11th grader, attended public developmental preschool in Greenwood as a supposedly typically developing child who was going to be the role model in his class. He was not. He was 3 years old, and it turned out that he was struggling socially and behaviorally. I didn't know because I had no other kids to compare to at that time. He loved to elope in public spaces. My husband and I did not love that. Fast forward to 6th grade, after years of being told that my son is really smart, but also has profound academic difficulties in some areas and behavioral challenges, which he often internalizes, there are not that are not expected. They are not expected to be met in school. We found out that he is 2E, which is twice exceptional, which is a child who is highly capable, but also has disabilities. Today, he is in running start at a local college. Advocacy for his and his brother's education needs has taken all of my time, work and leisure, but also often family time too. The supposedly free and appropriate public education my kids are entitled to has turned out to be very expensive and at times not affordable for my family or others. And I meet families with identical stories every day that I show up in a parent support spaces. For years, we were told that our eldest child is unlikely to qualify for services within the system. And even if he did, the help he needs to learn isn't available in schools. One thing that strikes me and a huge issue is that my husband and I have been told, just like other parents, that we were told this over the last decade, that there are other children in my son's class or school who are far more impacted than our child, and they need the help more. While this was true, he was less impacted only temporarily until his suicidal ideations over his learning disability struggles started. And with that, psychosomatic problems and so on. In my experience, the fundamental problem is that there aren't enough resources to meet the needs of disabled children right now, as evidenced by educators being forced to use triage as a decision tool of those needs that can be realistically met and who needs them the most. Triage is not an equitable assessment tool, and it is not meant to be used in case of, and it is meant to be used in case of emergency only. While I am aware that this is not a strategy that is used voluntarily, this clarifies for me what Washington education system is in a state, that Washington's education system is in a state of emergency. It was a long day for me today. My awesome, funny, kind teenager is still struggling to learn and function independently, no matter how hard of a math problem he can solve. One positive that the pandemic brought for him and kids like him was remote live learning in public school, which was not Seattle Public Schools. This access to learning was quickly taken away when the majority of students started returning to school buildings. He carries old and new trauma with him, but I know that he will be okay, productive, and happy eventually, if and when children needs are met early. I want you to know that they receive and they receive services when their needs emerge and not with a delay, we prevent suffering and tragedies and often medical problems that kids develop, as one of the students mentioned. Not to mention the burden, the impact, stress of advocacy that this has on our families. Meeting educational needs of disabled children timely also prevents the need for long-term services and expenses for school districts. My younger child is on a slightly easier, but not easy path to getting help because of my ability and my privilege to advocate for him. Many kids don't have that, most actually. In closing, I want to share that I learned over the years of trying to help my boys grow and learn that their education in the United States is being systemically treated as a privilege. I did not and do not agree with that, of course. And this is why I'm here tonight asking you legislators to trust that I ask you to commit to ensure that all disabled children have the opportunity to be educated with their neighborhood friends in their local schools and supported by qualified staff who have the ability and energy to care and support them. And I say this intentionally because of how we staff our schools and how we support our educators poorly. For disabled children to learn and thrive, we must invest in their education and our future today, not later. Thank you.
Thank you to Charlene and Yana. We are now going to turn to Open Doors for Multicultural Families, and we'll start with Moses. I'll hand to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Yana, for your testimony. My name is Moses Perez, and I am an Advocacy and Civic Engagement Manager at Open Doors for Multicultural Families. I am middle-aged Latino male, dark brown hair, black shirt, beautiful background behind me. Actually, it's a small creek in Port Ludlow, Washington, new place I just found. And I'm just very happy to be here. Thank you, Sam, and the team for the invite. We really appreciate it. At Open Doors for Multicultural Families, we partner with individuals with individual and or developmental disabilities and their families. These are populations that come from diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds. We serve these communities who basically lie at the intersection of both ableism and racism. Our work centers on supporting the needs of our families and individuals that we serve. And one of their top priorities has always been advocating for their children's education. The number one barrier that they have consistently come across or come against is gaps in language access supports within Washington schools. Without language access, there's no way for them to be meaningfully fully engaged in their children's education. As many of you know, the IEP process is extremely difficult. I would say even for educated English speakers. So you can imagine what our families face. In May of 2022, Open Doors partnered with families and other community advocates that are present here today to pass a groundbreaking language access bill, that is House Bill 1153. And this basically seeks to improve language access in schools. However, we know that the work has just begun, and now it's about funding the implementation. We are, currently hearing concerns from school districts that are lacking appropriate funding for mandated actions, such as having language access coordinators or to do the data collection that the bill and now the law requires. At the moment, still the burden of language justice is still falling on families and community stakeholders who are already facing multiple barriers. So for us, prioritizing language access funding is a key step in demonstrating the value we give to the most diverse and traditionally marginalized members of our communities. And I will go ahead and pass it on to my colleague, Peter. And Peter, take it away.
Thank you, Moses. My name is Peter Musanti, he, him pronouns. I'm a white man in my 30s with brownish red hair and a beard. I'm wearing a blue polo and black glasses. I'm a public policy analyst at Open Doors for Multicultural Families. As Moses mentioned, implementation of last year's language access legislation has begun. And one of our primary concerns is ensuring that language access policies include accountability and transparency. The first major due date for language access compliance was October 1st, 2022, by which time all districts with more than 1,000 students or 10% English language learners had to adopt a model policy and procedure for the language access program. In November 2022, we did an audit of 50 school districts in Washington state to determine if they had adopted this language access policy and procedure. I reviewed district information by going to each district's website and reviewing their published school board policies and procedures, just as a student, parent, or guardian would do. Unfortunately, only 12 districts out of the 50 we reviewed had an updated policy and procedure. 29 districts had an outdated policy or procedure ranging from 2016 to 2021. And 9 districts who fall under the mandate had no evidence of a language access policy or procedure publicly available. So as of late November 2022, 38 out of 50 or 76% of districts reviewed were out of compliance and missed the October 1st deadline by well over 30 days. The Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction is aware that many of the districts are out of compliance, but don't exercise any oversight in terms of adoption, and they don't keep track of if or when a district does comply with it. The minor steps currently required by the Language Access Bill are largely being ignored, and it's a serious concern that districts will continue to be indifferent to future mandates. Essential parts of language access, such as data collection and analysis, for example, can be compromised by this indifference. Prioritizing language access funding can help school districts comply with these mandates and help our community keep policymakers accountable to changes that improve student and family success in education. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you to both Moses and Peter. Next, we are going to go to Andrea Kadlik with Disability Rights Washington. Oh, sorry, skipped ahead. I apologize. It's Ayan next. So with Washington Multicultural Services Link, we have Ayan and then Hodan. And Ayan, welcome. It's good to see you again.
Thank you. I'm not sure if you're able to be seeing me because I'm going to read it from my phone note so that I don't have to go off topic. Thank you, guys. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Ayan Elmi. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a Black woman of East African origin. I am in my early 30s, wearing a purple headscarf and a traditional East African dress. As Sam have said, I'm the Family Service Navigator at Washington Multicultural Services Link, located in South Seattle. We serve African diaspora and Black families who have loved ones with disabilities, and self-advocates navigate all the systems and receive the services they need in the South King County area. Tonight's topic is very, very close to my heart, as I am the parent of a 13-year-old who was diagnosed with autism in 2015. And even though he was nonverbal and had behavioral needs at a very early age, he did not receive the services he needed until he was past the early intervention years due to the hoops as many parents and myself have to jump so that we can get the support our children need. He was in the Seattle Public School District until 7th grade. Then we moved to recently this past fall to Auburn, Washington, and now he's at Federal Way School District. This has led me to my job now, as I can help parents understand better the systems, being that I've been through it with my son for many years and still going through it. Every day I hear from parents and former students and many of my colleagues talk about how their families are talking about that their child did not receive the services they deserved and needed, which led them to either now sitting at home at either in the early 20s and sometimes older than that, with no plans and parents who have no help from anywhere due to the lack of services and support they received as young adults while in school, and the parents are sometimes feeling helpless. And many of our parents, as Moses and everyone said, don't speak English. They're from other countries. They've been here, sometimes they just came here, never heard of autism, never heard of a lot of the disabilities, and they do not know where to go. So that takes years off of the early intervention. And by the time they get to the system, they do not have the IEP language, as Moses has explained, is very hard to understand, even for English speakers. Under the Individuals with Disability Education Act, or IDEA, students with disabilities who require specialized instruction must receive the service they need without regard to cost to the parents. However, when there's no money to pay for those services, the school districts are in bind, and at the end, they're able to not really provide what the law requires. With less funds, this leads to either failure to implement a properly written IEP, for example, not providing the stated minutes of service, or they might just write in time allocation that's much less than what the child needed or actually received to ensure compliance. Either way, students are underserved and are the ones that lose the most in this. When the overworked teachers, therapists, or intervention specialists feel the stress and pressure of not having the time to do their jobs appropriately, it can lead to higher turnover rate, as many of us have said earlier, and even staffing shortage in the long term. With special education fully funded, money could stay in school district classrooms, resulting in smaller class sizes, more teachers and student support personnel, until the resources needed by the federal government to fully fund IDEA. Schools will continue to struggle to provide a comprehensive and high quality services the students with disability deserve. This is why we need fully funded special education, so all our kids have brighter future and better outcomes than they have now and are continuing to have. Thank you, Sam, Seattle Council PTSA, our legislators here, and all of you who have showed up.
Thank you, Ayan. I'm going to pass to Hodan, also of Washington Multicultural Services Link.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Hodan Mohammed. I am a Somali woman Somali woman. I am wearing a black scarf and a burgundy jacket. I am a parent. My daughter Ashwaq, she's in the transition services in Seattle Public School. Just talking about, again, this issue is also an issue that hits home for me as well. Just talking about funding and getting services. I remember Ashwaq going into the public school in 2004, and I can just, sharing with families my experience and the goods and bads every day. That's something that I remind families with the things that they need. Ashwaq has multiple disabilities. When families are referred to special education services and we do an evaluation, The evaluation basically talks about all the needs and the challenges that child have. But once child has already been put and families signed, those services do not come through. And for us, we're always trying to work with school districts and parents, because you have mentioned all these challenges that your child has, and the family have signed it, but yet it's not happening when the child attends in the classroom. Basic needs like ABA services, the behavior support, the OT and speech and etc. So for my daughter Ashwak, we went through a lot of challenges, and some of the challenges were her not getting the services that she needed, and family who looks like me were always getting those as well. And I want to keep it short because I was part of the committee. I know we passed our time as well. So I'm really asking, since I'm please fund fully funded special education services. This is really important. There are a lot of teachers who are supporting families and children, but their hands are tied. They cannot provide the basic needs. Imagine that you have 7 or 10 kids in your classroom, and each child has individual needs, but you're not able to provide that. And you are one person in the classroom. And when you ask for support, for example, one-on-one, there's no funding. When you ask for communication device for a child to communicate, there's no funding. So please fully funding special education. Also, the 13% cap also brings a lot of distrust for families and school districts. Thank you.
Thank you, Hodan. Next up, I would like to introduce Andrea Kadlec from Disability Rights Washington. And I'm just going to give a brief mention that we are tight on time. So I will pass to you.
Thank you, Sam. My name's Andrea Kadlec. I am an education attorney at Disability Rights Washington. My pronouns are she, her, hers. My physical description, I am a white, middle-aged female sitting at my computer next to a bookshelf. And I've had the honor of monitoring over the last couple of years in schools across the state of Washington, including schools in Seattle School District, on the use of restraint and isolation. And so I'd like to thank Representative Santos and Representative Paulette and others who worked on the 2015 legislation to collect data on restraint and isolation, and to address some of the issues with restraint and isolation use in schools, because that really paved the way for this work. We did find disparity in restraint and isolation use in our monitoring, and I know that Rita Green very eloquently earlier talked about disparity of students who are Black and Brown who are over-identified for emotional behavioral disability and special education, and under-identified for specific learning disability. We found similarly that we are re-traumatizing some of the students who are most traumatized in public schools. So the kids who are experiencing the most, or the students who are experiencing the most restraint and isolation, are students who are Black and Brown, students who are 2 or more races, students who are in foster care, students who are homeless, students who are in K through 5, and students who are male, and students who are low income. So we are very appreciative of the opportunity to see more professional development and more funding go to addressing this disparity, and to really providing some of those upstream elements to support mental health and trauma in schools, which everywhere we went, we heard that that was a major issue from administrators, teachers, school professionals, and families and students. So, and also providing that early academic, behavioral and social emotional intervention support in an MTSS framework, and looking at equity in and disparity of punishment and restraint and isolation use. We saw really great examples out there of principals who are doing an amazing job. There's some good schools in Seattle that have really reduced restraint and isolation. We know that Seattle eliminated isolation recently, so much thanks to all of you who worked on that policy and procedure. That was a big advocacy lift, and it will pave the way for many school districts who may be looking at doing the same thing, hopefully soon. We don't want to create policy in a vacuum, so we're working closely with the Washington Education Association and others so that we make sure that as we look at professional development and other elements, that they fit the needs and that it's not an unfunded mandate and an additional burden, and we're really addressing and supporting teachers and giving them the supports that they need. And we know that lifting the cap and injecting more funding into special education will support this. And so we're very grateful for the work that everybody here is doing. And thank you for your time. I won't take more time because I know we're over.
Thank you. And next up, I would like to welcome Molly and Olivia. And Molly is the Director of Student Support Programs at Seattle Central College, and Olivia is a student in Seattle Public Schools who may or may not be wanting to be on camera. Either way is fine. Thank you. I'll pass to you, Molly.
Thanks. So I am Molly, and I am a Black woman. I have light brown skin. I'm wearing long, hand-beaded, dangly earrings. My hair is pulled back and it's brown. I'm wearing a black t-shirt with white letters that say "No New Youth Jail." My background is bluish gray with trees. And my daughter is here, Olivia. And she has curly brown hair pulled up in a bun with a purple sweatshirt on. And I'm going to quickly talk about a little bit of our experience as she utilizes special education supports. And our experience in that has been traumatic, to say the least. We started out advocating in the first grade, where she was recommended for behavioral social support. And as a parent, I'm also been an educator for over 22 years. So as we advocated that this is not a behavioral issue, each year she's been offered a different layer of support. She's now in the 6th grade and currently can read at a 3rd grade level. And what we've realized, and what many kids have to go through, is they have to fail up. So we continually put students through hoops, and if they fail that, then maybe they can get another support. If they fail that, then maybe they can get another support. But that's only if they have the familial resources, time, money, availability, if they feel like it, to be able to go down to the school and advocate over and over in order for their student to get the next layer of support. And those layers, still continue to fail our students. And Olivia's undiagnosed currently dyslexic, because we also don't have the financial resources for students with, if they are diagnosed with dyslexia in our school district, we don't have the financial resources to serve them. So the solution is to not diagnose them and then have them continue to go through. And so also a reminder that budgets are moral documents. And so what we choose to fund or not fund shows what we value and who we value. And our kids are listening to that value statement. Also, it would be unlike me to not also mention that I do also work with folks who are currently or formerly incarcerated. And this process that we are putting families and students through is actively funneling the school to prison pipeline. We cannot miss that point in any way. So Olivia recently wrote a letter to her teachers to let them know what was stressful for her at school. And so either she's going to read it or I'm going to read it. You going to read it?
Yeah, I'm going to read it. Hi, I'm
Olivia, and I wrote a note to my teachers, and this is what it says. I hate this, and here are some reasons why. You don't know how to help. You think repeating everything and adding the words that doesn't help. And when I bring it to your attention, attention, I can't.
It's okay. All you say is maybe.
Oh, all you say is maybe try to pay more attention. How do you think that makes me feel? Maybe you should walk a mile in my shoes. Now, a reason why. Now, and I know a reason why you can help. Specialize, fully fund my education for my future. Mic drop.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, definitely a mic drop to Olivia. So we are going to go to our final student video of the evening and then on to Representative Paulette. And I want to thank everybody. Let's go ahead and go to our video.
Hello, my name is Abel Bryant, and I use he, him pronouns. I have short brown hair, brown eyes, and I am white. I am a straight A student, a full-timer in the Running Start program, and a student council vice president at North Seattle College. I am also neurodivergent. My success within the school system has been supported by my 504 plan. I spent this September securing my SAT accommodations. I had to research the process of receiving them. I did not even know SAT accommodations existed. Once I learned of this process, I struggled to receive responses with the necessary parties. They had a huge caseload. I was lucky that my accommodations were processed by the end of the month and approved early the next. On October 12th, I arrived to take my SAT, but my test would not occur that day. Only 30 minutes before the test began, I was confronted with a room full of people, and they were all testing on a different time scale than myself. When I told them, these are not my accommodations, I am supposed to test alone with a proctor, I was told they did not have space for me. My accommodations had not been implemented. During this time, I was in school and beginning my first job, often sending and receiving these emails while in class or in the office. I'd already rescheduled my midterm once for the SAT. When we got a new date, I rescheduled again. When we got another date, I rescheduled a third time. I retook my SAT with the appropriate accommodations on November 1st and 2nd. These delays mean I have no test scores for college applications, and many deadlines have already passed. My experience is not an isolated issue. It is not restricted to one person or one school. The task of accessing accommodations and fighting for them to be upheld falls on students and their families. Access is denied to those who need it and revoked at the most crucial of times, the time when we are receiving an education and building our futures. This can change. My family and I are fighting to change what happens to me, but state legislators can change what happens for everyone. Thank you.
I want to say thank you to Abel, and also a quick thank you to June No Ivers for filming and editing our videos and running tech tonight. Our next speaker is Representative Paulette. He has been involved with this issue for as long as I have known him and years before that. He has been involved in PTA. He has worked to support families and students, and we are just really thrilled to give him the opportunity tonight to tell us a little bit about his perspective and to share his thoughts.
Thank you very much, Sam, and to everyone who worked so hard to put this together, and to all the people who have been willing to bear yours and share your stories, and show what is not easy to share. I am State Representative Jerry Paulette from the 46th District, which is the northern part of Seattle, from Lake Washington to Aurora, roughly. And I am a white male with gray hair and a gray beard. I am very colorblind, so I'm not going to tell you what shirt color I'm wearing because I would get it wrong. And I use he, him pronouns. And I'm sitting in my home dining room with the windows framed behind me. Again, thank you for everyone who has been willing to share this evening. Not long ago, the Seattle Times wrote something about my work on special education and said I had described it as my mission in public life. And it is one of my missions in public life to fully fund and improve special education. I come to this as a result of having gone through what many, many, many parents have gone through. Janet, my daughter, when she was in 2nd grade, could not read. And I want to share this with Olivia, who read so well just a few minutes ago. Today, our daughter is a professional doing digital communications. She couldn't read in 2nd grade, and her wonderful, incredible Bryant Elementary teacher volunteered to come into school 3 days a week from January through June, a half hour early, to give her time to try to help Eileen to read. But you can't teach someone to read by spending more time when they have severe dyslexia and you haven't been trained in how to teach reading and phonetics proper to people with dyslexia. Turns out it's how you can actually reach every student in the general ed classroom as well. But we don't train. Why don't we train? Lack of money. Pure and simple. And the cap on how many children with disabilities the state is willing to fund is nothing short of both unconscionable and unconstitutional. We have a duty to fully fund basic education and a free and appropriate public education for every single child. And saying that we will not fund the student who exceeds 13.5% of a cap is just unconscionable as well as unconstitutional. And who are the children above the cap? Who are these children? We've heard tonight they are most likely to be low income and children of color because they're the ones who can't get evaluated. And the Office of Education Ombuds has just recently put out a report documenting cases where children waited for 3 years to get an evaluation for disabilities. A child will never recover that lost time. For 6 months, they will not recover if they're not given services, much less 3 years. So, in my advocacy for special education, we had a special education statewide set of forums a few years ago on improving special education. One of the elements led to the creation of the Special Education Advisory Committee. And I was sitting at a table with Eastern Washington special education administrators and teachers, and every single one of their districts did not provide Spanish language material for children who were in getting an IEP. We need to change so much, but you have to start by fully funding, instead of saying to Seattle Public Schools, use your levy money for $92 million worth of services this year that the state should be funding, and instead levy money is funding. So tonight, please make a commitment. Number one, to ask each and every one of your 3 legislators to not just lift, but eliminate the cap on paying for students with disabilities education. Number 2, ask them to fully fund special education. Number 3, ask them to support those other pieces of legislation that have been discussed tonight. And there will be another piece that I will be introducing and have been working with many of you on, to ensure that students get evaluated for their disabilities in a timely manner. What you can do. Number 1, ask your legislators to come to your PTA. Come to the PTA and discuss this and ask them point blank, will you be supporting fully funding? Will you support lifting the cap? Will you support the bills that we've talked about tonight? Or get together a group of 2 or 3 educators from your neighborhood and your neighborhood schools, and 2 or 3 parents. Ask your legislators to join you for coffee on a weekend, since we're about to begin session on Monday, and join you for coffee to hear your stories about what services, not having services mean, not having evaluations, and ask them to make a commitment. This is the year. This is the year we can finally eliminate the unconscionable, unconstitutional cap. And this is the year we can move to fully fund special education and move ourselves much more close to the dream that education is opportunity for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Paulette. And one thing that my child just asked me to say is, for legislators who might think that students don't know that the cap means that there is a limit to the number of disabled people that are funded, please don't imagine that our kids don't know. They know. And what they think is that this means there's not a lot of space for disabled people. And we don't want them thinking that, because we know the value of every child. And we're asking for the elimination of the arbitrary cap on special education funding. We're asking you to fix the multiplier so that the education of disabled students is paid for by the state. We're asking you to fund language access. The bill you passed last session was fabulous, but districts need the funding to implement it. We're asking you to fund and support inclusion so that every child has access to the services they need, and every child can benefit from knowing people who move through the world in all different ways. We're going to be giving you so many opportunities this session to connect and to talk to your legislators. I want to give our legislators just a few minutes to ask, do you have questions for us before we ask you our big question? No? All right. So my first question to legislators, and I'm going to ask you, I'll start with Representative Paulette. Will you commit to supporting legislation that both eliminates the cap and increases the multiplier for special education funding?
Yes.
Thank you. And the next person I see on my screen is Representative Reed. Will you commit to supporting legislation that eliminates the arbitrary cap and increases the multiplier?
As the daughter of a school district OT and special ed administrator who grew up in Rep. Paulette's district, I enthusiastically say yes.
Thank you. And then I see Representative Farvar. Will you commit to eliminating the cap and to working to eliminate the cap and increase the multiplier?
Absolutely. Enthusiastic, yes.
And I know we've had other legislators on here and they are not on my screen. Is
Rep. Santos is here.
Oh, Rep. Santos is here. Would Representative Santos be willing to commit to supporting legislation to eliminate the cap and increase the multiplier?
Yes.
Thank you. Is Representative Macri still here? And I see.
I am.
Would you be willing to commit to support legislation to eliminate the cap and increase the multiplier?
Yes, I would, for sure.
Thank you. It says Representative Valdez, but I know that you are Senator Valdez. So Senator Valdez, will you commit?
I haven't learned to change the background screen yet, so hopefully I'll figure it out. But yes, it's an absolute yes.
Thank you so much. Do we have other legislators? I know that I saw, I know that I've seen more popping in and out, but it was a long meeting tonight. We had some troubles with interpretation at the beginning. So my final question, and maybe you can answer it all at once. Will you all commit to being a champion for students with disabilities and their families by advocating for increased funding and resources for public school special education services? Is that something we can get you all to commit to?
Yes.
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 Thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I know we've run long because we had some technical difficulties at the beginning. I want to make sure that everyone sees in that the message from Yana that says, be sure to contact your legislators. And there's a link to find your district finder. Some of our audience members may be in a new district as redistricting did happen. I would like to give legislators an opportunity. You listen to us, and if there's something that you would like to share with constituents before we wrap up, we would welcome that. Just go ahead and unmute if you would like to.
I just want to thank you all. Sam, thanks for your work to help organize and to facilitate this beautifully. This was a really great session. I hopped on a few minutes late, but it was really wonderful and very helpful and informative as we prep for session to hear, especially from the students directly who are impacted and the families and all the folks who are supporting our students and families, and it just gets my mind in the right frame as we head into session. So thank you. I know this is a heavy lift to do right after the new year, and I really, really appreciate the effort.
Thank you so much. And again, I know it's late. I also know that sometimes legislators like to share something. I see Representative Farvar.
Yes, I want to echo Representative Macri's sentiments. Thank you all so much for pulling this together. I have a good idea of how much work it takes to organize an event like this. I also just have to say how wonderful it is for me to end the night with you all. I mean, this is the community that I came up in legislative advocacy in, and it's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces and powerful voices. For those of you who don't know, I started at Open Doors for Multicultural Families, and I actually worked on Representative Orwell's very first version of the language access legislation. Know that you have my full support on those issues. I am so thrilled to be back here with you all tonight in this capacity. I am in enthusiastic support of so many of the things you all shared today. I'll also say that I'm especially excited for the work ahead on restraint and isolation. Please know that my door is always open. I'm always excited to speak with you all and learn how I can support you. And then I'll also just echo that I believe someone earlier today said that budgets are moral documents, and I just want to offer my enthusiastic agreement with that statement, which is exactly why I'm in full support of increasing funding for special education. It is about time, and I'm here with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Representative Reed, I see that you've unmuted, so I'm going to go to you next.
I'll be so quick. I just want to say thank you, as everyone said, for all of you being here. It's a huge lift, but this is a really inspiring group. It's given me a lot of ideas as well. I think you're a great example for other advocacy efforts about how to pull together a really effective argument on your case. And Sam mentioned earlier about how much all students can benefit from being in educational settings with students of all different learning styles, backgrounds, abilities. I lived that in my own life. My mom was a early childhood OT in shoreline schools and would often take me to school with her and have me sit in and participate in her classes, her sessions with students with special needs. And that was a hugely impactful experience for me to be in her community and with her students. It's something that I have always carried with me as someone who was also bullied in school and never really felt like I had a place to belong and fit in. Having that early experience connecting with different communities, knowing that there are many ways to learn and to be a part of the school community gave me a lot of confidence to continue. And I'm really committed to the work that you're all doing. And Olivia, thank you especially for sharing your message. And I really look forward to continuing to work with all of you in the legislative session.
I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I'm going to have to let our interpreters go for the evening shortly. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for learning with us. And feel free to reach out to any of the organizations here tonight. I can connect you with any of the speakers and presenters or students who spoke tonight. We are excited about the opportunities to come. We're excited about the possibility that the funding could follow the needs of our children in our schools. We are asking you to fund our futures, but we're also just asking you to fund for the future for the Washington that we all want. We know that you have a lot of issues that you're looking at this session, and many of them are really multi-generational issues. The work that our legislators are doing, the work that you are doing, you'll need the students who are in K-12 now to carry on that work. And you'll need the disabled students in K-12 now to lend their expertise and their knowledge of all the different ways to move through the world to carry on your work. So we're asking you to fund our future, to fund the people who will help make sure that the work that you care so much about will carry forward for the future of Washington. Thank you, everyone.